My name is Taylor Zink, and for my research, I looked at domestic violence. Okay, sorry. So my legal question is, do specialized domestic violence courts work? And if not, what types of changes should be made regarding mandated treatment or policy implications? From all my research, it's really unclear whether specialized intervention programs work just because there's a variety of different forms of treatment. So well-conducted research is essential to guide the efforts to communities and treatment programs and to channel funding to the most appropriate intervention. So an important sociological study was the Minneapolis study by Sherman and Beck in 1984. The study examined the relative effectiveness of various police responses, such as arresting the batterer, talking to the couple, and telling the batterer to leave. Comparing arrest records and interviews with the victim, the arrest response had half the rate of recidivism as compared to non-arrest conditions. Shortly after the result was published, the U.S. Attorney General recommended that arrests be made a standard treatment in cases of misdemeanor domestic violence assault. And today, over 84% of the nation's municipalities have this type of condition. So, defining domestic abuse, also known as domestic violence or intimate partner violence, can be defined as a pattern of behaviors in a relationship that is used to gain or maintain power and control over intimate partners. And domestic abuse can be physical, sexual, emotional, economical, or psychological. And below I listed some characteristics. So some stats, on average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by a partner. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have been victims of severe physical violence. And here's Ohio statute regarding domestic violence, if anyone was curious. So who are the offenders? Research suggests that offenders are typically men who are members of minority groups between the ages of 18 and 35, with a median age of 33, with a prior criminal history and prior substance and alcohol abuse problems. And who are the victims? Again, research suggests that victims are overwhelmingly women, from minority groups. They also have prior alcohol and substance abuse problems. They've been priorly abused and are poor and have limited support. Men as well can be victims. However, men are more likely to experience psychological victimization in the form of verbal abuse as compared to physical abuse like women. And individuals who identify as part of the LGBTQ plus community are at an increased risk for rape, physical violence, and stalking. So effects of domestic violence. The research suggests that female survivors of severe violence are 3 times more likely to be clinically diagnosed with depression, internalizing disorders, and are more likely to have attempted suicide than men. Male victims typically tend to suffer primarily from disruptive behavior disorder and substance abuse. And the research suggests that this may be from men being socialized to internalize their feelings and the potential embarrassment for being seen as a victim. Children and youth who are exposed to domestic violence at a young age have emotional, mental, and social damage that can affect their developmental growth. So specialized domestic violence courts began in the 1990s. Many jurisdictions created them to ensure case follow-through, aid domestic violence victims, and to hold offenders accountable. Below, I listed several of the major counties in Ohio that have specialized domestic violence courts, and 32 states across the U.S. have some form of domestic violence courts. So do they work? In Center Studies, she analyzed 24 domestic violence courts across New York. The study focused on the court's effect on recidivism, case processing, and case resolution. The main point of interest was the rearrest rates after 3 years and whether that case involved a domestic violence charge. Using a regression model, the study focused on demographics, current charges, prior arrests, and prior convictions. The findings suggest that domestic violence courts have a minor positive impact on recidivism. In addition, there is some evidence that domestic violence courts increase conviction rates and sentencing involving jail and prison. However, they're pretty minor, but domestic violence courts did have a statistical significant impact on case efficiency by an average of 2 months. And this is consistent with prior research. Again, it's really unclear if domestic violence courts work or not, just because different jurisdictions have different rules and requirements. So batterer treatment and whether it works or not, a really important study was done by Babcock, who analyzed domestic violence treatment in Seattle, Washington. The purpose of the study was to examine recidivism of domestic violence following mandatory arrest and mandated treatment. The study found treatment completers had significantly less prior criminal involvement than did treatment non-completers. Those who completed treatment are more likely to be educated, reported higher income, and were more likely to be white. 8% of treatment completers committed another domestic violence offense after completion, and 23 of non-treatment completers committed another domestic violence offense. The study also examined the relationship between completing chemical dependency treatment and recidivism for domestic violence. And the study looked at 149 men who were assigned to chemical dependency treatment. 64% of them actually completed, and those who did complete were significantly less likely to reoffend. So what would be more effective treatment for domestic violence offenders? Substance abuse occurs in 40 to 60% of all reported domestic violence incidents, and Smith's study compared several different types of substance abuse and their association with intimate partner violence. The largest two substances that had the biggest impact was cocaine and alcohol use. Marijuana did have a correlation with psychological intimate partner violence, but not physical. And opioid use was not associated with physical violence, instead increased the likelihood of victimization for women. And O'Fraley's study focused on whether substance abuse treatment decreased intimate partner violence among married couples. The study looked at the year prior to treatment and the year after treatment. And 50% of alcoholic patients had been violent towards their female partners. And then in the year after treatment, violence decreased significantly by 25%. And again, consistent with prior research. So predictors of court-mandated batterers who drop out, research suggests that batterer treatment overall has minimal impact on reducing recidivism, but only has an initial deterrent effect. In Cassel's study, the study focused on 154 men who were mandated by court order to participate, and applying a regression analysis, the study suggests that men with lower income who are no longer intimately involved with their victims and who have reported lower levels of physical violence are more likely to drop out. So when creating programs, it's important to ask and figure out who's asking for help and where the state needs to focus their efforts. And Child's study, his study revealed that survivors' overall help seeking is influenced by gender, patterns of victimization, age, and physical health. And below I have listed the different types of informal and formal help that they looked at. And if the study found that women were 2 times more likely than men to ask for help, and women were more likely to use formal help than males. The findings suggest less formal help seeking among Black and Hispanic survivors, and this suggests the importance of cultural competency for service providers. And it's really interesting that the study found that minority groups were less likely to use informal help, because in this study, the researchers compared informal and formal actors in the courtroom and their likelihood of having a civil protection order being granted. Specifically, was the CPO granted and for how long? Informal actors were legal counsel, judges, and informal actors were victim advocacies, families, and friends. And the study found that longer CPOs were likely to be issued when the victim advocate was present and informal support, such as a family member. So this is important to know, because from prior research, minority groups who are victimized are more victimized than whites and more likely to seek informal groups of help. So what else can a court do? In jurisdictions where they have limited resources, creating a specialized domestic violence court might not be realistic. So there's other non-traditional ways that a court can help kind of decrease domestic violence. And an interesting study I found by James Lacey, the study compared whether domestic violence suspects who are intensely supervised by bail bond agents during pretrial release were less likely than regular supervised suspects to commit a subsequent domestic violence offense. The study looked at 500 individuals over a 3-year period and found individuals who were intensely supervised were less likely to be rearrested for a domestic violence charge. And why this works is because federal and state laws that provide for release via cash bail specify that a bail bond agent has a legal right to supervise/monitor their bailee when, where, and how they choose. Bail bond agents are not bound by the same legal constraints as a police officer, and bail bond agents can even arrest the bailee as long as the bail agent is acting in good cause. Bail bond agents have no financial incentive to use their power to prevent clients from being rearrested, because when a bailee is taken into custody for an offense, the bail bond agent is not required to return the client's cash premium. So bail bond agents can kind of act as another eye on offenders, and the research also suggests that reoffending is more likely to happen after after the offender is released from jail. So it's important to have them being supervised. And lastly, I included the Ohio statute on bail bond agents and their duties. So thank you for watching.